Thank you, Madam Speaker. And returning to a late show question I put forward in this House in question period back in November, on November 22nd. It deals with something compelling, and that's Canada's preparedness for extreme weather events, particularly fires, floods, storms of all kinds, and how this government can better prepare for them. My argument then and now, and certainly the Minister for Emergency Preparedness and I have talked about this, I wouldn't say that I get the sense anyone is against it. But we're not prepared for extreme weather events of all kinds. I come from a province where 619 people died in 4 days in the heat dome, all preventable deaths, where we lost billions of dollars of infrastructure in the atmospheric rivers, where we've had extreme weather events and storms that have cost lives. We talk about human lives a lot. Many in this chamber may not know that in the heat dome in summer of 2021, 3 billion sea creatures died. So residents in my community dealing with unbearable heat went to the ocean to cool off, only to retreat because of the stink and wonder why it smelled so bad. 3 billion sea creatures died. If we're going to be prepared, we have to talk to each other. Now, when I talk to people like Barbara Roden, who's the mayor of Ashcroft, BC, and she tells me that in terms of emergency preparedness, she discovered when we realized, okay, we're going to have to evacuate the homes of long-term care for seniors. Let's get the school buses organized. But in her regional district, some school boards had decided not to keep insuring the school buses when the schools weren't in session, when kids weren't going to school. That's the kind of information we need to share with each other, because some school districts keep insuring their school buses. What if the federal government set up an emergency preparedness fund that said, better canvass every province, territory, Indigenous community? Are the school buses insured year-round? Because we may need them. We may need to bring them back because there's extreme fire warning, there's extreme flood warning. My argument here in this place is not partisan. We need to pull together a standing committee for emergency preparedness that does things like exchange stories of best practices and figure out how do we better prepare. We need to be talking to people like the First Nations Emergency Services Society of Kamloops, or former chief of the Kanaka Band First Nation, Patrick Mitchell. Communities that figured out how to take care of themselves early, how to rebuild faster, know where the vulnerable people are in community and rescue those people. Severe windstorms, hurricanes, floods, fires, heat domes are now inevitable. We need to understand climate better. We need to understand that we need carbon pricing, we need policy, we need to reduce greenhouse emissions. But we're at a point now where we can't turn back the clock, we can't get back the hospitable climate we once had. We have to make sure we don't get into such a bad situation that we are in a climate in which we cannot survive, which becomes acutely lethal. We need to plan ahead for things like what happens if power goes out at the same time that we have a heat dome. As Professor Blair Feltmate from University of Waterloo has said, if in the 2021 heat dome in British Columbia power had gone down, thousands would have died, not hundreds. Madam Speaker, I know I have 9 seconds left. We're almost out of time, all of us. But there's still time to act. We need to pull together and act like it's the emergency it really is.
Yep.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to begin, because I think it's really important, to really reach out, and I hear what the member is saying, reach out and say that our thoughts are with Canadians who have been feeling the brunt of the impacts of climate change and its natural disasters, be it through wildfires, floods, droughts, or other disasters that have taken place over the last decade. And I also think it's very important, if I can take this moment, to thank firefighters and first responders who are putting, literally their lives at risk every day to help Canadians and support us through these moments. I think it's important, though, in the context of this conversation, for Canadians to know that there is a robust emergency response regime in place that encompasses all levels of government. The work starts at a municipal and provincial level and this allows for a localized and tailored response. But the Government of Canada is taking the role of leadership to coordinate efforts from coast to coast to coast. We've been working with our provincial, territorial, and First Nation partners to bolster collaboration during times of emergencies. And we're investing massively in civilian response capacities that can leverage different capacities across jurisdictions and can provide Canadians with the relief they need during the following large-scale emergencies. We have acted decisively to be better prepared to respond to wildfires. We have funded the training of 600 wildfire firefighters and 125 Indigenous fire guardians. These firefighters will be on guard this summer, or on the ground this summer, to protect our communities. The training program is ongoing, and we aim to train 1,000 new wildfire fighters this year. We are grateful for the work they do and the risks that they take. And that's also why we announced just this week on Wednesday that we will double the tax credits for volunteer firefighters and search and rescue volunteers. We put in place a $256 million fund for wildland firefighting equipment to the provinces, and we have signed agreements with 11 provinces and territories. These agreements will provide long-term funding needed to procure life-saving material and equipment. Our government understands there's a need to build communities that are more resilient. That's also why our government has devised Canada's first ever national adaptation strategy, which is a whole of government plan designed to increase the resiliency of Canadian communities and respond to the impact of climate change. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Highlands.
I'm sure that the government intends to do things better, but if any of the events I've mentioned this evening happen again, we are not prepared. We need to have a standing committee that meets every 2 weeks, federal, provincial, territorial, local governments, and Indigenous peoples and nations to share information. The adaptation strategy from Environment Canada's plan around heat domes is that by 2040, no more Canadians will die in a heat dome. That is an admission of failure. By tomorrow, no Canadian should die in a heat dome if we pass on best practices for first responders and good advice for Canadians for how to survive. We have no firefighting force. We have not ordered any water bombers, even though the de Havilland water bomber plane, which is best in class, is right now back ordered for planes going to Europe. None are ordered for Canada. I'm not partisan about this, but I am angry because we know better. We have some time and we better use it to talk to each other and build our capacity.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look, we recognize that extreme weather events are threatening the lives and livelihoods of a growing number of Canadians and straining emergency management resources across the country. But I do want to emphasize this point that while it is important that emergency management remains a responsibility of local governments. It is their responsibility. We are committed to working with our partners on solutions tailored to the needs of their communities. And I had outlined some of the ways that we are doing that. Through the Humanitarian Workforce Program, we have invested more than $160 million in the Canadian Red Cross, St. John Ambulance, the Salvation Army, and Search and Rescue Volunteer Association. The funding helps these organizations develop capacity and mobilize quicker and in bigger numbers. We are working with local communities, and we are making sure that we are partnering to help Canadians in difficult times, such as in these natural disasters.
The Honourable Member for Peterborough-Kawartha not being